How to Meet Death. Emily Dickinson addresses death using suspenseful language only to describe it as a mundane experience. In Dickinson's poem, I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died, Dickinson takes all that is known and unknown about death to develop a narrative that is grim yet peaceful and accepting. The poem embraces the macabre, however, rather than a theme of fear. Dickinson creates an experience of death that is comparable to a somber drama. Contrarily, Dylan Thomas in Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night writes about death with exhilarating language. Thomas writes of death as an adversary to be vigorously fought against. Though Thomas and Dickinson speak rhetorically about death, their contrasting depictions can give us insight on how we could behave at the moments that we cross death's path. The narrators of Dickinson and Thomas approach death through literal different perspectives. Dylan Thomas in Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night analyzes death with an air of action and fantasy. Thomas's persona encounters death as an observer. In the poem, the persona utters a command, "Do not go gentle into that good night one." Here, Thomas uses imagery to represent death as darkness and night. From the first line, we can extrapolate that the author is pleading with an audience to resist death. In I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died, Dickinson inspires an analysis of death through a more sedated lens. Dickinson's poem is revealed to be the first perspective in stanza 1, where she writes, I heard a fly buzz when I died 1. Here we learn that Dickinson's persona is giving a first-hand account of dying. In the poems, the differences in perspectives lead to variation in how the phenomenon of death and dying is expressed. The variations arise because death often impacts two different parties, the deceased and those who remain alive and have had a connection with the deceased. Though the perspectives are different, an atmospheric parallel can be drawn between Dickinson and Thomas's poems. Both poems feature solemn mourners. Dickinson writes, the eyes around had wrung them dry. 5. The eyes Dickinson refers to are the mourners, all her people, especially those who viewed her persona's dying body. Dickinson uses the term wrung metaphorically to describe how the mourners have cried to the extent that their tear ducts now run dry. In Thomas's poem, it is his own persona that grieves as he watches his loved one die. When Thomas writes, Curse, bless me now with your fierce tears I pray, 17-18, in stanza 6 we learn that it is his father who is soon to be deceased. We can empathize with the persona at this moment. The desperation becomes apparent as he pleads for his father to show signs of life, even if it be a tear. An atmosphere tinted with dread and mourning being constant in both poems allows us to analyze and contrast the variations that exist between the poems and deduce how Thomas could portray death as an epic battle while Dickinson portrays it as a simple process. Thomas describes throughout his poem cases in which people have resisted death. In stanza 1 he writes, Old age should burn and rave at close of day, rage against the dying of the light, 2-3. Thomas's old age addresses the elderly and instructs them to passionately cling to life. Thomas's purpose for writing about death is to be inspirational and hopeful. These are characteristics of life. As his persona stays by his father's deathbed, he hopes to invigorate his father, like a general to his soldiers before war. In contrast, as we look at Dickinson's dying moment, within stanza 3 she writes, What portion of me be a sinnable, and then it was, there interposed a fly. As she fades into the abyss, all she can recognize are the flaps of a fly's wings, until even that fades away. Dickinson's persona does not experience a fight or struggle, but rather a peaceful and simple transition. Death is a mystery that we all must come to terms with. Both Dickinson and Thomas approaches death with different motifs in their poems, and thus they give us alternative road maps that we could follow. Although many would say Thomas's story is a story of death, I would argue it is the opposite. Thomas writes the story of life. Throughout his poem, Thomas's persona pleads with his father to cling to life. He does so by portraying scenes of battle with death as the adversary. In this way, Thomas shows us what life is all about: hope, love, rage, and fighting to stay alive. Dickinson shows us another side of death. Her persona deals with death in grace. In the final stanza she writes, and then the windows failed, and then I could not see to see. As she takes her final breath, life metaphorically described as a window closes. Dickinson in this poem uses death to teach acceptance and letting go. In the fast-paced world we live in, with all of life being in some sense a fight, Dickinson's peaceful approach to death is the better precedent for readers.